Welcome to the Ironman Insider presented by Martin. I am your host, Matt Lieto. And last time I was able to sit down with Braden Curry, actually down in Cairns, which was super fun to be down on the race course, obviously, and great to be able to sit down and chat with Braden. And I'll tell you, like, run, don't walk to register for that race if you're want to go explore someplace awesome. It's a pretty amazing spot, not only because I got to hug a koala bear, but it's pretty cool race venue as far as just logistics of being able to watch a race and participate in a race. But we got a new guest, and it's 4th of July season around the U.S., so I thought no better time than now to bring on American hero and IRONMAN Pro Series leader, Matt Hanson. So he's had, I think, a resurgence this year, kind of highlighted by the series. He'll probably tell me he's been here the whole time, no resurgence, but which is probably fair. But let's get talking to Matt. Matt, how we doing, man?
Yeah, doing well. Doing well. How are you today?
Oh, pretty good. I'm not the one who had a 6 or 7 hour training day, but somehow I was the last one to get here for the podcast. So apologize for that.
No
good training.
Worries. Yeah, all good. It's warm out there, so good prep for the races that matter.
Awesome, love it. And what do you got coming up? I know it's been a busy season, and I think you've done a better job than anybody making it as busy as possible. What do you got coming up next?
Yeah, Lake Placid will be next, and then we'll see from there. I'm on the list in Frankfurt, and need to think a little bit about that one. I wasn't really thrilled with the performance that I put out at Ironman Texas, and so there's some pros and cons to going to Frankfurt. I think obviously if I could have a great day in Placid and have a pretty decent day in Frankfurt, that'll get rid of one of those scores and put me in a little bit better standing overall for the series, which has been the focus since the day it was announced. But obviously that'll be another Ironman in the legs before Kona. So it's kind of balancing the pros and cons there. And figuring it out what's going to make the most sense.
Yeah. And can we talk about that a little bit? Like, it's obviously the first year. So you guys are figuring out what the best tactics are, right? Like, obviously you left some more points on the board than you wanted. Is that to make sure you have enough points so that your Kona result will be highlighted more, or is that kind of like you want as many points in case like not everything is like lying on how you do in Kona?
Yeah, I mean, I would hate to have a flat tire in Kona or mechanical, derail your chance at a top finish after, being in, up near the front for most of the year. I would hate to have something silly like that make it so I'm, not even in the top 10. That would be pretty frustrating. And so, going to Frankfurt is would be a little bit of a safety measure, I guess, to prevent that from being a possibility. But the reality is, if you want to be in the top 1 or 2, you've got to have a good Kona with it being worth 1,000 more points. You have to have, a good day there. It's going to be tough to not be in the top 10 there with, an additional 1,000 points, and then, be in the top 1 or 2 or 3 in the overall series at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, when the series was announced, you were like the first name that came to the top of my head as far as who has that consistency and the skills necessary to do well in 70.3 racing and full Ironman distance racing, but also someone that seems to be resilient enough to, if they had to do 4 Ironmans in a year, could do it and it wouldn't be that big of a stress. Like, were you just like licking your chops when the series was announced? And tell me about like kind of my thoughts on that your resiliency and that aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last year was not the year I would have hoped for. I had a pretty good 2022, and so I made the decision to have an aggressive race schedule for 2023 and chase some big races, and it definitely didn't pan out for me. I had some rotten luck in Texas, and then age Uber lost control of his bike right in front of me and kind of took me down with him, unfortunately. And then I had a heart issue, I guess, as a result of long COVID in Hamburg that I'd had a couple times in training, and then it decided to show up in Hamburg as well. And so that, just just had some tough luck and some poor tactical choices in some other races, and just didn't have a good year, and was not in the best of places, mentally or physically coming into the fall. And I think I was out supporting the women in Kona that race, and was on a training run with Julie sagging me, and that email came through, and she just kind of is like, well, that's interesting. And I think the pace all of a sudden picked up about 20 seconds a mile, and I just got really excited. It was a shot in the arm that I really needed, because I've been a guy that has been able to race a number of Ironmans in a year and be okay with that. And I've had a little bit of success on the 70.3 side and the full side as well.
Yeah, no, and was it more of a kind of a boost, considering that Nice didn't go kind of how you like maybe dreamt? And I mean, to be honest, you were pretty straightforward going in, that like that course didn't necessarily suit you. Like talk to us about that.
Yeah, Nice was always going to be a tough one for me. I had a lot of conversations with Julie about whether or not to put that in and go after it, because I'm not the best descender in the world by any means. And obviously that those guys are going to descend pretty well. But like I said, because I had a decent 2022, I could make the aggressive choice. And I feel like if you qualify for the World Championships, you owe it to your team that supports you to be there. And I made the decision to go. I went there for a month in June and trained, and then thought I was fairly comfortable with the course, and then was pre-riding the course a week before again, and had a car kind of brake check me and went into the back of their windshield and broke a couple of ribs. So wasn't the most comfortable race for me, but just did what I could, and tried to not be a guy that left with nothing but excuses. I knew I was going to be up against it. I hoped that 21st was not something I was going to be fighting for, but I had to run pretty darn hard to come into 21st.
Dude, I was out there, and you were all in the mail, no doubt. Like, you were doing Matt Hanson things on that run. Is it harder for you? And I think I like laughed doing it, because it's like to be able to watch, like it's not humorous, but to see how much you can just punish yourself regardless of what position you're in. Does that what has you pushed that hard? It's clearly not the result if you like ran in at 21st, right? Is it like you honoring that team? And what is it that makes you push just that stinking hard?
Yeah, it's a number of things. Obviously, the team sacrifices a lot, and if you go out there and just kind of, go at it halfway, you're not respecting that. Like my family sacrificed a lot. I was away from last year. I think I was on the road over 150 nights, because just the way that the season shook out, and spending a lot of time in Europe trying to prep for these races, and I really didn't get anything to show for that. And so, that's definitely a big part of it. And the other part of it is kind of what fuels me as an athlete is, obviously I want the result, but I really want to know how deep I can push myself and, really find that level. Like when I'm racing at my best, that's my mindset going in. It's not like, oh, I could win all this money. It's let's find out how good I can be today. And if I get beat, tip my cap. If I had the best day possible, like at Boulder, Trevor was outstanding. I had a good day, and you tip your cap to a guy like that on the day. He was fantastic. Figure out a way to try to turn the tides the next time you race.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think I had often in my career, mostly because I was getting my butt kicked my whole career, people are like, what was it like? I'm like, it was amazing watching that guy run by so fast, right? Or like whatever it is, like after you're done and you realize nothing can come of it, there's a respect, and like clearly that person is training hard. And I imagine you go back to the drawing board and you're like, okay, what can I do to possibly get closer? Obviously good days and good days, like, you can't pick them all, but
Right. Exactly.
And not to be, I'm not picking on you at all. And I think we know each other well enough to know that I'm not. It's out of respect, like what you're saying, like pushing yourself, and why I was so like inspired and like appreciated what you were doing in Nice. Like what did you learn from that race? Because I mean, you only unlapped yourself from Sam like in the last kilometer of his race, and you were going like
Right.
it was. You know, you weren't trying to beat Sam to the lap. You were just doing what you could. And to me, I'm just like, dude, Matt has every reason to not do what he's doing right now. But you did. Like, what did you learn from that race that you're now putting forward through this season, you know, from that experience?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you always have a reason to be out there, but sometimes you have to work harder to find it. And,
Right.
that I had to work pretty hard. The descent was not going well. That was in my head. My every turn was uncomfortable with the ribs, but just on the last little stretch back, it's like, all right, well, bike's over. There's nothing you can do about it. What can you do to, hopefully come away with just a little bit of pride out of the day, or to, just hang your hat on that. Yeah, it wasn't your day, but you still went out and gave it everything that you had, and you know, maybe what might somebody else watching you specifically, if they're just watching you, what would they think? I had to use every trick in the book on that last 5K into town to just get my mindset right and be able to go out and push hard. And there's been days where the bike hasn't gone well or the swim hasn't gone well, and I was still able to run up into the top 5, the top 3. I came off the bike at Daytona in 22nd place and ran up into second. So the experience of the past kind of helped me draw on that, and always learn that there's always a reason to fight for it, even if it's not just for a result.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think for everybody listening, that's rewind and listen to that all over again, because I think that whether or not you've got talent or you have to work harder or it's you work through pain tolerance in races, like that's the thing, right? Is you've got to find what it is that you're there for and find a way to push through. And every time, like it always blew my mind that like if I DNF'd, it was because I was literally unconscious or I had a mechanical that I couldn't fix. And you seem like that same type of athlete. And for me, like we got to print a shirt out. I'm probably misdo it, but what you just said was you've got to work. Sometimes you got to work harder to find that reason, and that's rad. Yeah, I think
and that's something I always talk about with the athletes that I coach, is kind of knowing why you're out there. There's going to be dark moments in the race, and sometimes they're really long, and sometimes they're really short. But knowing why you're there can definitely help get over those, or once they finally start to fade, they can help you kind of get back on it.
And for you, like in that, I'm going off like way off topic here, but you've got to find way to get through those dark moments. But for you, is getting off of the gas ever an option? Because I feel like you're always just like, oh, like full on, and then you find your way through by going full on, or you don't.
That's kind of been the mentality, for better or worse, is when things don't go your way, work harder.
Totally.
That works until it doesn't. Sometimes that puts you in a hole, and your kind of body forces you to take a rest. But that's definitely been the mentality since I was a little kid, is if I'm not getting what I want, I just have to work harder. And maybe that's not always good, but sometimes it works out.
That's awesome. Kind of on the same subject, but a little different, is to me, it's impressive. For those of you that don't know, like, would you agree, Matt, that you were like a classic age grouper that like got fast and decided to turn pro?
Yeah. I mean, I never planned really on doing this as a career. I was a college professor. I started my first age group, Ironman, was 2011, and planned on being one and done. ended up qualifying for Kona at my first shot. I'm like, oh, I should probably go do that. And then I really fell in love with the sport there.
Right.
And yeah, it just kind of snowballed. I wanted, and 2 years later, I had a goal just to earn the pro card. I never planned on taking it. I just wanted to be good enough to know that I could have. And that year I ended up having a triple flat in Kona. And the goal going into Kona was to win the overall age group or amateur division, and had 3 flats. And so that kind of took that away from me. And so I took my pro card so I could revenge race at Arizona in 2013. That was the reason that I went pro, and ended up, I think I was 18th that year, and I was like on cloud 9 that I wasn't last. So it's like, oh, I kind of sort of belong in this pro field.
That's awesome. And it didn't take long. Was it 2014 you won your first pro race? Is that right?
Yeah, I won Chattanooga, I guess, the first full year as a pro. Definitely a course that suited me really well, especially at the time, because I was not the best swimmer, and was definitely spending a lot of effort working on it. But that year, I don't think they shut the dam down at all, and so I think I came out of the water 38 minutes or something like that. A beach ball made the swim cutoff, I think. So that definitely helped set up the day. But I don't think a lot of people knew who I was at that point, and came off the bike with a big group of guys, and a couple people up the road from me, but was able to run them down and spend pretty much the entire run at the lead.
No, I remember watching that race actually, because I was gonna go. I had a ticket to go there because I think that was the year Lake Tahoe was canceled for forest fires. So I was in the water at that race and canceled it and decided to go. And then as I was like, not quite, but like driving to the airport, I was like looking at names and looking at the flows, and that they weren't, I'm like, man, there's no way this is going to go well for me considering what type of race I was training for. But then watching it, I was like, oh, didn't expect that dude to pull it off in, pretty fantastic fashion. It was an impressive debut. What did it feel like? Was that like a pinch yourself moment, or like the analytical mind where you like, okay, there's still things I need to work on if I want to be here?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, the first, being able to meet your wife at the finish line for your first ever win, having an oatmeal cream pie and some other little Debbie snack holding the banner, that was a pretty fun moment. But yeah, I got done with that, and then that was kind of the first sparks. I was still working full time and still teaching at the university, and that was kind of the first spark of is this possible? Is this, something I can do full time? And it wasn't the time to walk away from the university at that point. I was on the 10-year track, and obviously there's a lot of comfort that comes along with that. But then, fast forward, 9 months later, winning Ironman Texas in 2015. And that kind of was okay, it's time, like we can make this work. We can walk away from this job that you have and do this full time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And watching that, I was on course for that win that you had in 2015, and it was certainly, kind of not out of nowhere, but like certainly one of those things that. And the reason I say that is you could tell, like you and your wife waiting at the finish line, it was just like, oh wow, this kind of just happened. And I kind of think one of the things that impresses me about you, and tell me if this is for me, I feel like it's a because of, not in spite of, but you seem to be one of the most like normal pros, right? Like you don't make your life unbusy. Like you've got a lot of work going on. You've got a super successful coaching business, family that is continuing to grow. It seems like you guys are still adding family members.
We just added the one for now. She's 3.5 months old. We'll keep a pause on the additions for now, but who knows what the future holds. But
so is it? Yeah, is that what like keeps you grounded? Does that keep you focused on what you're trying to do, or is that a challenge for you?
Having Olivia?
Yeah, the whole like, that your most pro athletes are like very singular, and it's like the world revolves around them, and that does not that's not the vibe you put out. And clearly with the life you live, it just does not seem like what's going on.
Yeah, I've had some really good influences in my life that taught me a work ethic at a young age, and I try to emulate those individuals as best I can, and that's kind of a motivating factor for me is to, my dad is one of them, but also some other guys that my uncle, my grandpa that I grew up working on the farm or at his truck shop, or and just watching them, how they were as men, how they were as fathers, how they were as human beings, and so the motivation is to be half as good as those people were, when it's all said and done, and that's having those influences in my life. It seems like it would be a waste to not try to do the best I can to, in all aspects of life, to mimic those people who did the same and that I benefited from. Like, I was baling hay with my grandpa on the farm at 5 years old, 10 years, all through high school. And, to me, it was time with my grandpa, but I look back now and I learned a lot from that. I was working at my uncle's truck shop, and, I always kind of felt like it was charity because I was, being paid to work over the summers or any Christmas break. But, again, I learned a lot from him, and watching him, he's still out there working crazy hours at, well into the time that he could retire. And, my dad's the same way. And, so that's important to me, is to, I feel like if I was wasting talents that I earned at a young age, I'm kind of not living up to the influences that I had growing up.
That's awesome. So like for you, not spending the time to have a successful coaching business and do it, like you getting home and sitting in the Normatex for 3 hours that's not appealing to you. You're not doing enough.
I mean, it's appealing to me, but I also have, like, I'm 39 years old. I'm having some decent success right now, but I went from walking away from a 10-year position, essentially, which has a lot of long-term comfort, to having a lot of unknowns. And so I put my family, my wife has a great job, so that might come off as me being an egotistical male, but the way I kind of set that, is I put our financial future at a little bit of risk, by making that choice, and I don't want that to ever come back and bite me. So it was even more motivating to make sure I'm doing things not only to be as good of a triathlete as I can, but to set myself up for life after racing. And, I think coaching is going to be I hope coaching is going to be a big part of that. And that's why I work as hard as I do on the coaching front now, is because the racing side of things will be there for a few more years. I hope. I think I've got a few more good days in me, but it won't be there forever. But I can coach for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I love that. And what about, if you're looking at, and I think you're a unique character as far as how you were brought up, and the work ethic example that you had from your grandfather and your dad and other people in your life, I'm sure. But if you're looking at, or if you had a young pro athlete come up to you, and if you were able to give them like kind of input on what you learned, what is motivation, or like, I feel like there's a lot of times you have athletes like living in the clouds, right? Like, okay, well, if I win this race, then this, and then like you're like, no, man, I'm 39. Like a lot is happening after that. And that may be blended with the like training methodology to have like the improvements that you've had and the consistency, where I think a lot of people think there's this, like, you sprinkle a little dust on your head when you get your pro card and like things are just going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I've been fortunate enough to be able to chat with a few people. I was thinking about this like maybe last year, like when Tim O'Donnell announced that was going to be his last year, and like he was a guy that I was always looking up to, training with him as part of the Julie's group, and I learned a lot from him. And then like, well, well, crap, who am I going to look up to now? And then I kind of had that, like, maybe people are looking at me that way. And, kind of, was a little bit of a mindset shift, in that regard. But, so yeah, definitely something I've had to think about, because I've had a few young people that are joining Julie's group or training with them, or I've been coaching as well, that have just, new pros. And the biggest thing is you got to show up day in and day out. World championships aren't or races aren't won in a single day of training. It's you've got to embrace the grind, and you got to be willing to go through it. And sometimes being too comfortable in your circumstance makes you too comfortable and too complacent. And so, being a little uncomfortable is okay. That's definitely one of my other mottos. A couple that I always repeat with the people that I'm working with. It's know your why and get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that can be obviously in training and racing, but it can also be, in all aspects of life.
Totally. And did you think that, like, not that anything that you accomplished in your career was luck, but the kind of the way that you went in as an age grouper was with that job and that 10-year goal, that having that to settle you in like reality helped? Like, I know when I turned pro and moved to Bend, I got a call randomly out of nowhere from Paula Newby Fraser, and I thought it was like a prank, right? I was like, what are you calling me for? And she's like, I heard you quit your job and you moved somewhere to be a pro. Like, don't mess it up like everyone else does. Like, does that, having that real life and like not depending on, like, you didn't go to Texas to win your first North American championship because you needed the 25 grand or whatever it was at the time to win, right? Like, you just wanted to go be your best.
Yeah, I wanted to go be my best. And then I walked away from university shortly after that and proceeded to have the worst year of racing in my career in the end of 2015, the beginning of 2016. And it was because my mindset was on outcome, not process. And It took me a while to realize that I was so outcome based that it wasn't fun to be around, because I wasn't getting the outcome I wanted. And so that was just making it kind of snowball and spiral. And you kind of you teased cans at the beginning of the show, and that was where I had the aha moment. Was on the way home from that. I ended up going there and crashing in the rain on one of the descents there, and so didn't have the race I wanted at Texas. Definitely didn't have the race I wanted at Cairns, and I was on the long flight home with road rash and was just feeling sorry for myself, and just kind of get to the point where, like, all right, I've got to make a switch. I've got to make a mindset change and do, get a new process. And so I kind of went, all in on that. I had a good relationship with the coach at that time, but I just needed everything new. And so that's when I switched to working with Dibbo, and it was a very big switch in terms of one was very numbers oriented, and Dibbo wasn't so much at the time, especially. She was very much like, hey, we just got to learn to feel, and we got to learn to race and enjoy it, and just go out and ride your bike and ride hard. And that's what I needed at the time. And so, that's when I started to find success again, when I could get back to that original mindset.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize you were with Divins, or you've been with Divins since 2016. Is that right?
2016. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
She's a legend. Yeah. A legend. She was she still racing? Was that her last year, or was it 15?
I think 15 was her last year of triathlon. She was doing some mountain bike stuff for a little while with Leadville and that for, that was a couple years beyond, but she can still ride her bikes with us. So.
Oh, I know it. I remember plenty of team camps where I got dropped way after Julie did. She knows what she's doing on a bike.
Yeah, she likes to sit in the back for 5 hours, and then the last 10 minutes she just hammers it and up the hill on the way back to the condo.
That's hilarious. Well, back in the day, she was at the front for the very beginning and did the same thing. So felt good. Man, it's funny. I can relate to, not obviously the specific situation, but these like kind of cruxy or like important parts of our career and defining moments And like no better time than like the longest flight ever back from Cairns to be like probably like in tears or like disappointed. Like I want to see that notebook. Do you have like the notebook that you wrote all the stuff down?
I'd probably be somewhere. It probably has a few things I wouldn't be happy if other people saw it.
Yeah. It's crazy though how those like little moments, like you wouldn't be here today if you didn't have that moment.
Yeah,
Right?
I would not be able to keep doing this. Like it was not good. Like, my wife was frustrated with me. I was frustrated with me. It just, I'm sure my dog was frustrated with me. It just wasn't, I wasn't having any fun. And that was the biggest thing is, I took a step away from teaching, which I loved, I enjoyed a lot. And to do this and chase this dream and like this, I'm not having any fun. I have to make a change. Otherwise I have to make a change.
Right. Totally. That's awesome. And, kind of back to what you were talking about earlier in that being process driven, not outcome driven. And again, I'm going to this is me the third time I've tell people to go rewind and listen to that again, because I think that's super important. And you'll probably curious if you have similar experience with coaching clients where it's like, man, the ones that are patient and are 3 to 5 year plan, they knock it out of the park in 3 to 5 years. Not every time, right? Like stuff happens, but the ones that are like, hey, I want to make this change for like this race specifically, it just doesn't really go that way, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've learned a lot about myself or through the mistakes that helped me be a better coach. I think, it's not just, focus on the outcome, but it's also like, how are you spending more time thinking about your training than you're actually training, right? Because like, it doesn't matter how fit you are when you get to the start line. If your emotional noodle or if your emotional batteries are dead, you can't bury yourself. And so, there was times when I was just mentally smoked by the time, because I put too much of myself into the preparation. I was using too much of my emotional battery to nail the training, but also stressing about it constantly. And, I see that in a lot of athletes. So like, you're texting me at 10 p.m. at night about your training session that was 3 days ago. Like, let's turn the page and just, your job as an athlete is to execute the training and give qualitative feedback. My job on the coach is take all that stress away from you, right? That's why I'm in your corner. And I bring that up a lot more because I've made that mistake a lot of times in the past. As an athlete side.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, that's interesting. The battery thing, like, it's also that doesn't live in a vacuum, right? Like if your mental batteries, your mental batteries, running low, you're probably not sleeping well. Cortisol is probably high. You're probably training too much too. If you're like, because those are also the clients that are texting you and you're good enough coach to be like, no, you don't get to add an hour to this ride. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like that situation. And I think that's the biggest thing that I learned, through my own mistakes and, other people that I helped while I was racing. But I mean, if you don't show up, like the difference between showing up with a full battery and being able to use what you're saying and like finding that reason, how hard it may be in the moment. And like for me, pain tolerance was my only gift, like going absolutely to the well because I have a full battery. I take that 20 times over whatever for someone that is like 3% fitter than me at the start line, right?
Definitely. I think, surrounding yourself with people with like mindset and that, that are finding success in their own ways definitely helps as well. I talked with Dibbo quite a bit about this, like, and she brings up her time with Trek K-Swiss as well, with all you guys, when, it's like, man, when a couple people started, having great races, then we all started having great races. And, that was, there was, I think it was 2019 when, Tim Don started winning everything. And then like, well, I'm doing, we've got the same team, so I can win everything. And then, it just kind of snowballs. And then, like when everybody's building each other up, and it makes each other just that much better.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So want to go back to racing just real quickly, because I know you've had a long day already, but so with the Pro Series, everything that we said, the end of last year, out on a run with Julie and you realize it. And with all that experience that we've talked about and what you've learned, did we make big changes, or was it like, we started at the beginning of the call saying like you had bad luck last year, which is totally a thing. I'm not like, we all know luck is a thing. Do we think we've had more luck on our side, or are there changes that you've made that have allowed you to be able to be that super fast 70.3 athlete and that obviously like incredibly strong iron distance athlete?
I don't think we changed too much. One thing that it did was I removed any thought or choice about what races to pick for the year. It was like, well,
right,
here's my schedule, done.
Less stress.
Now let's prep for it. And so we didn't have to, have that like, oh, well, maybe this field will be like this and that would be really good for me, or this course is really good for me. It's, well, I don't love Oceanside, but I got to figure out how to race there because that's race number one, period. I got to be there. Texas is always, is a great place for me. I got to be ready for that. And it also allowed me to kind of break up the season where I got to finally do another like full, 70.3 push, which I haven't done for a while. Like I've always just put more importance on the Ironman racing and done some 70.3s in there to fill out the schedule or just to break up the training a little bit. And so I got to, spend a couple of weeks between Texas and Chattanooga, and even the early, January and February with our daughter being born, my time had to shrink a little bit. So the intensity went up a little bit. And I think that we learned a little bit about, I don't have to have these huge volume weeks to find some success and to have good training. I think I took more days off in the first half of the year than I have in any year ever since becoming pro. And, part of that is because obviously you get a little bit of less sleep and you need to have that. And Julie was great at, just kind of taking the feedback that I was giving her. It's like, all right, Sunday's off. And so that kind of goes back to the emotional battery discussion that we were having before. We made a few adjustments, but I think a little bit is it was just, again, another mindset shift is I don't have to win every single race I'm on the start line for to do well in the series. I just have to execute the best of my ability and I'll be up in the mix at the end of the year.
Totally. And I love that, and I never thought about that, especially as a North American athlete, the simplification of instead of looking at this calendar over and over again, well, here we go. I'm going to do it. And it's going to be kind of early season. We got to get going. And you've obviously put yourself in kind of, I think, the driver's seat with the amount of points you have on board where you're an athlete that is already talking about getting rid of results and replacing them, especially on the long races, to be able to, replace them for better ones. And dude, were you surprised by yourself at all, at Chattanooga with your 70-point ability to tap into that 70.3 speed? Because that's I'm impressed by you as an athlete. I think you know that, but that short course speed that you've been able to get out again while racing those Ironmans to me is pretty remarkable.
I made the decision at the end of the year last year. I didn't have we talked about how I wasn't really thrilled with the year, and so I decided to do my first ever standalone marathon to just see if I can make the trials cut.
Right.
And so I was like 218 or nothing. So all the training I was doing was for a 218. And so I just kind of did a lot of, I did more 1K repeats than I've done in my entire career. And I think that definitely carried over into the 70.3 prep, and it, locking into that, 108, 109 pace was not that hard because I was doing it in November after 4 Ironmans of the year. And, so I think that definitely, it wasn't by design, but it definitely carried over and helped a bit.
Dude, that's, I never even thought about that. Yeah. I think running when you've got all the triathlon in your history and then getting off the bike and being like, all I got to do is run half as far as I was planning or half as far as I was planning. That's crazy. And running 108s and 109s for any distance sounds like an absolute nightmare to me, but I'm glad that you've got that covered for us.
Yeah, an all-out marathon, it hurt a lot. I didn't, I don't have any plans to do another one anytime in the near future.
That's awesome. Well, we know you got Placid coming up.
5 weeks to prep for it.
Right, totally. And that's funny. And that race specifically, I had an athlete do it last year as well. And it's like, it's always a like, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, I want to do this in 5 weeks. You're like, what the heck,
Yeah.
man? Like, it's always kind of that. But that's awesome. So we know you got Placid coming up. We've talked about maybe whether or not you're going to, do Frankfurt as well. But clearly, you've already said Kona is on your mind, and, a race that you want to do well at. And I mean, like, what do you had a good race, I think, last time you were 15th. Like, it's been one of those things where, am I right that, and I know you're not going to say that was a good race, but that you haven't performed.
I've had on the island so far.
Totally. Like, you haven't raced well in Kona, right?
Yeah, I haven't.
Yeah.
And, I've dedicated every season to trying to figure that out. Last year, obviously, Nice was a little bit of a curveball, but, I will be really disappointed as an athlete if I don't have at least one bowl by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So, I think that I definitely have the ability and the tools that I need. I haven't done it on race day, and some of them, have been preparation issues. Some of them have been execution issues, but at the end of the day, I just haven't got it done. And so, this year is another opportunity to fix that.
And I'll go out there and say some of them have been luck as well. You don't need to agree with that, but that's definitely execution falls under luck sometimes. But
sometimes.
Yeah. But I will say, man, like, and I agree with you. If I'm being blunt, like, I would be disappointed if you didn't have a bowl sitting on your shelf. Like, you deserve it as much as anybody. And I'd had you picked up there a long time ago. And to me, like, you seem analytical as well, but go back and look at some results, man, because I think to me that magic number, and for me, I only remember this because of these guys that I was training with at the time, but like that 15th, the like okay result after a long time was like literally the next time podium, right? Like, you figuring out enough to like, oh, I can exist in this space. Everything I've thought that I can do here. Yeah, it feels more like a reality. Like, it's hard to relate as an athlete to try to perform to be like on a podium in Kona when you've never had anything close that you can compare and be like, oh, I'll tweak this and tweak this. You're like, no, that was all total off the back, right? Like, the ability, once you've learned those lessons and had that, like, you got one on the board in the top 15, like, there's a lot of athletes that just, that's it after that,
Yeah, that's the plan. Is
I love it.
Kind of figured out how to have a decent day. Now we just gotta have a great day.
Totally, because I think people go in there at times and they're like, I'm gonna race, and then you're like, wait, I'd never do this for an Ironman distance race, right? Like, oh, okay, I need to figure out how to, like, again, put one kind of on the board. And do you think, how much do you think the venue changes is going to affect, because we haven't seen it yet, is going to affect the tactics and the type of racing in Kona? Because personally, I think it favors someone like you that isn't up in all the chaos and is not throwing bombs, is like, I'm doing my watts, my Matt Hanson watts, and I'm going to do my Matt Hanson run, where all these guys are like, I don't get to come back here for 2 years. There's a bunch of young guys like a Sam Lalo that are already, and tell us a bit if you've noticed this as well, are just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and sometimes world championship wins come out of that thing they threw against the wall.
Yeah, Kona is always a different beast, and when we only have every other year, it definitely adds a little bit more stress. You could kind of feel that with the women's race when I was just there spectating last year as well. Like, it just, people were just a little bit different than when you normally talk to them, and it kind of, I think that especially for American sponsors, they probably care a little bit more about Kona so far than they do Nice World Championships. Europeans probably flip that around,
sure.
But I think that it would mean a little bit more to my team to have an amazing day in Kona versus, I think it would surprise the heck out of them if it was in Nice, but that's a different story. But yeah, at the end of the day, I've tried to race other people's race in Kona and epically failed at it. And like last year when I got 15th, or at St. George the year before, I think I was 13th. I raced my race and was able to, work my way up a little bit forward. And so, yeah, that was a learning experience. And there's a ton of new talent coming out, and, there's not a lot of people that crack the code their first time. There's been a couple in the recent years, and that's great. They're all very process oriented athletes as well.
Right.
But most people, it takes a few times to figure it out, and I think it's because they try to either change too many things when they go in, or they try to race somebody else's race because that's what's won it before. And that's just, hasn't worked for me. So I've just got to stick to racing, the way that I need to.
Totally. And I think like for you, part of the reason why I think you have a great opportunity there is, this is years ago, but I went and looked at all the swim results when I was racing, and there was this weird phenomena that like, if you swam within a minute of the front group, there was like a bunch of podiums and top tens. And if you swam between like 52 and 56, there was like one, and it was like Norman Stadler. But it was the guys that swam 56 and slower that were like, whatever guys, go have it, do what you can. And all that means is like those guys were doing their best race, and at no moment in the day were they racing somebody else's race.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
for sure. I mean, hopefully we're working our way up in the swim into that 50, low 50s group. But
yeah. Well, don't worry. I'll be out on course and I'll just be yelling Matt's race, and you won't know if you're talking about myself or you. It's fine. No doubt you've got like Julie and your team around you is going to hold you accountable to like keeping to the things that you learned to get that 15th. And obviously I know that's, not a result you're going to look back on your career and be like, that was like my great day. But like I said, it's all pieces of the puzzle. But the things you've learned from being steady in this season as well with the Pro Series, one of which it sounds like you got a little training camp going on right now. Jackson in town. You guys working out together?
Yeah, Jack's come and trained with me a couple times in the past, and we chatted in Chattanooga, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we should do that again." He didn't know if he was going to do Lake Placid or not at that point, but I was like, "Yeah, come on, you're always welcome." And so yeah, we've got I guess number 1 and number 2 in the series training together right now. So that's it's a lot of fun.
So is he now, this is breaking news or whatever, but like, is he now planning on racing Placid?
Yes, I think he's going to be in Placid.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't looked at the list yet, but like, cause at the beginning of the season, it didn't seem like that was a thing. And like, I was looking the other day and I'm like, dude hasn't done an Ironman yet, and he's sitting in second place. Like, that's pretty stinking impressive. So Jackson has entered the conversation, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like there's a lot of guys there's a lot of racing left to, there's
so much,
Spain and Lake Placid, and then Frankfurt and Kona. So, there's going to be some shuffling along the way for sure. There's a lot of guys who are in the top 10 with just 70.3s that are going to be doing at least Lake Placid. And if they qualify for Kona, who knows if they show up in Frankfurt or not. Like, Jackson's one of those guys, Lionel, Trevor, but then there's a lot of the Europeans who haven't, come over to the States, and they'll be doing the 2 races there. And so, yeah, it's great to have a few points and to be sitting on the top right now. But by no means am I like saying I can put my feet up and say it's just going to be smooth sailing from here. I've got a lot of work to do.
Right, because there are other guys that are like, okay, my plan is going to be like hardened and consistent, and I'm going to work the back half of the season when everybody else is rested on their points that they got early, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the back half, there's a lot of points to be got. Kona is an extra 1,000, and Taupo is an extra 500 for 70.3. Yeah. So. There'll be some movements through the end of the season. I think that was a really well designed process by the Ironman team to put all the importance, in those kind of last couple of races, and it'll make it fun and hopefully good for the people who are following the sport to stay engaged and keep watching till the end.
Totally. And for me, I've been surprised at how much the leaderboard has changed, and like, you know, you got athletes like Colin Zuch still in third place, right? Like guys that nobody would have talked about early, and a bunch on the women's side, just a bunch of up and down as far as who's on that podium. And I think it's, you know, it's exceeded kind of our expectations. Are you surprised? You don't have to be surprised, but has it been fun for you? This, like, has it made it fun? Like having this like kind of sub story and sub like thing that you get to spend a little bit of your mental battery on throughout the season?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Like I said, when I heard about this series, it was a shot in the arm, and one that I kind of needed at the time, to be completely honest with you. And it's been fun, fun chasing it. It's stressful. Every race that you do has to be an A priority race. Like, the old adage was you get 2 A priority races throughout the year. Well, now you got to have a minimum of 5 of them, because the overall is going to go to the people who are able to put it together and be consistent throughout the entire season. And there's some people who are picking just 5 races and trying to do some other races alongside of that outside the series. And if they have the 5 days when they need it, that's great. I chose to be a little bit safer and have at least couple extra races just to give myself a chance to get a bad score off if I needed it. And like, it was good to see that Oceanside score go away this last after Boulder.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that you would have been stoked, but again, it's all for a reason, and it's all lined up pretty well for you in the end. Man, really appreciate you taking the time out of a busy build up into Lake Placid, and can't wait to call you and Jackson at Lake Placid here in a few weeks. Give him a high five for me if you remember. And thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Well, awesome stuff from Matt Hanson. As you could tell, went a little longer than normal, but I just like chatting to Matt. Dude's sweet, has a lot to say. He's not just a pair of strong legs. He's someone that thinks about all of his racing, obviously, and like why it's important. And I love some of those sound bites that he had for us that I'm sure we'll throw all over social media, because that guy's an inspiration. But again, appreciate Matt coming on. Great guest for us there. And, we're in the middle of the IRONMAN Pro Series now, and like that dude's still at the top. He's a little humble, I think, or like, checking himself that, a lot's going to change, but he's right. A lot of racing is going to change. He definitely is in a driver's seat of sorts, but it could be turned upside down next time we have a race. But we've got some racing to go still. But on the women's side, we have Maja Stage Nielsen has moved in a lead with her consistent season and her second place at Ironman European Championship, Hamburg, and 7th at Ironman 70.3 Les Sables. So she's moved in to the lead there. And with her performance at Cairns Airport Ironman Asia Pacific Championship Cairns, Kylie Simpson moved into second. So consistent racing has gotten her up there as well. And Fenella Langridge plugging away. She was early leader. She's now in third place in the series. And, obviously Matt Hanson in the lead, as we said, with his consistent racing. His training partner, for the time being, at least, Jackson Laundry in second place, as I said, with no full distance races yet. So that guy could catapult himself to the top pretty easily in Lake Placid, depending, obviously, how that race goes. And mentioned him during a chat with Matt Hanson, but Colin Zuch, 22 years old, in third place. I believe he just has one Ironman distance race on his season so far too. So some movement possible from him. And next up is Victoria Gasteiz, July 14th, and Ironman Lake Placid just a week later. So no doubt things are going to get shooken up with all these pros out there giving it their best and trying to get as many points as possible before the end of the season. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you're sitting on the trainer, you can also watch the podcast as video on our Ironman Triathlon YouTube channel. And to stay up to date on all the latest IRONMAN Pro Series news, follow at Ironman on Ironman Tri on Instagram, and check out the proseries.ironman.com for standings, athlete bios, episodes of A Fighting Chance, and replays of other races and more. And I'd be remiss to not thank again our presenting sponsor, Morton as the official sports performance nutrition partner of the Ironman Global Series, and obviously supporter of our podcast here. We couldn't do it without them. And obviously they've had some huge results with Sam Laidlow and Lucy Charles Barclay winning their world championships while being fueled by Morton. And all Ironman athletes have access to Morton hydrogels and solids on course in 2024. So train with that stuff. You'll be ready to go and in a better spot on race day when you get to use that super high performance product, obviously. And again, thank you so much for joining us and all our guests for making this podcast what it is. We're just 4 episodes in now, but super excited for the rest of the season. And can't tell you how stoked I am to be a part of the Ironman Insider podcast presented by Martin, and a lot more great conversations with this awesome season ahead. I'm your host, Matt Lieto. Thanks so much for tuning in.